Years later, Joanna appeared by my husband's side, bearing a face that was 3 parts similar to mine. I knew it. This daughter of the mistress of my father was trying to do to me what her mother had done to mine. But how could I let her get her way? That very day, I left Simon with a divorce agreement, taking half of his assets and walking away early. I'm done playing. Chapter 1. Simon was left stunned after his wife hung up on him. Married for 6 years, his wife was famously known for her gentle and kind nature, always composed and gracious. Even with his difficult and stubborn daughter, she never showed a hint of impatience. It wasn't until he got into the car in the parking lot, the door closing behind him, that he realized he might have said something wrong. Joanna is still your sister. After all, if you're so hostile toward your family, how can I trust you'll be a good mother? As he fastened his seatbelt, his hand instinctively rubbed his brow through the gap in his glasses. In truth, he couldn't entirely blame himself. After all, Joanna had just teared up, saying she was quitting her job. Right after that, he got a call from his daughter, complaining that her mother, Luciana, had withheld her allowance, embarrassing her in front of her classmates. Of course, he didn't distrust Luciana, but his daughter's sobbing had irritated him slightly. The car started, and a wave of unease washed over him. Luciana losing her temper for the first time left him feeling unsettled. He pressed his lips together and sped up, returning to the villa 10 minutes earlier than usual. A faint light flickered from their bedroom window, and Simon unconsciously let out a small sigh as he made his way upstairs. But all he found was a divorce agreement quietly lying on the small table. Chapter 2. From the moment I saw Joanna at the company and learned that she had become Simon's secretary to the time I packed my bags and left, no more than 3 hours had passed. Another 3 hours later, I was already 800 kilometers away at my mother's house. She opened the door and, seeing me looking as if I had just escaped from a life-or-death situation, stared at me in shock. I told you long ago that marrying him wasn't a good decision. I said, years ago. My mother was forced out of her home by Joanna's mother and daughter and left with nothing. She later remarried my stepfather and became a stepmother herself. She's kind-hearted, treating her stepdaughter as her own. By the time we reunited, she had already moved on from her past marriage. She had wanted me to settle down and marry. That year, after she underwent a life-threatening surgery, I couldn't bear to go against her wishes. So I chose Simon from among the men I met on blind dates, a single father with a 3-year-old daughter. She didn't want me to become a stepmother like her. But I told her, if I must marry someone, it has to be Simon. My mother hugged me and cried. A marriage without love and children is the worst kind. But I didn't care. After all, without love and without children, it meant I, Luciana, could leave whenever I wanted. Chapter 3. Joanna's arrival hit me like a tsunami crashing onto the shore. But it wasn't our marriage that took the blow. For 6 years, Simon and I have been respectful but distant, almost unfamiliar at times, mostly because of me, like a deer drinking from a stream, legs tense and ready to leap away at any moment. Simon had expressed his frustration over my distance more than once. We had never deeply kissed. Last night, when we were close, he insisted on finding my lips. As usual, I avoided him, but he grabbed my hands, unwilling to let go. No, I turned my head away forcefully. For some women, their lips are the final private territory. Luciana, you're one of those women. He bit down on my chin. I'm not. Can't you fully accept me, Luciana? He cupped my face in his hands. I pushed him with all my strength, my legs kicking wildly. But he didn't care, pressing his body down over mine. I want all of you, he whispered, placing a soft kiss on my nose, making me tremble all over. I was furious as I met his deep, affectionate gaze. By then, I already knew about his relationship with Joanna. I wanted to tell him that he didn't deserve me, but I quietly sighed in relief, thankful that he had never truly possessed me. So when he brazenly brought Joanna into his life, I immediately turned and left without hesitation. As I lay down to sleep that night, I felt a sense of closure, like I had been waiting for this other shoe to drop all along. Let someone else play the role of the perfect Mrs. Simon, whoever wants it can have it. Chapter 4. Simon and I didn't really have any conflicts. In fact, We were once emotionally connected. He was honest with me, telling me that Sophia was his sister's daughter, orphaned after a plane crash that took their entire family. When he held that little child in his arms, he swore she would be his only daughter for the rest of his life. Then he solemnly promised me that apart from this, he would never let me suffer any injustice. That day, we walked along the riverside, and the scenery in the evening breeze was enchanting. Even the wind carried a touch of tenderness. I opened up about my past, telling him about my cruel and venomous stepmother, my cold-hearted father, and my scheming, deceitful stepsister, Joanna. His eyes were full of shock and compassion, and he held me tightly in his arms. Luciana, you will have a home of your own. Not long after, he proposed to me, and later gave me a grand wedding. Perhaps because he was so satisfied with me, he clumsily presented me with a box of diamond rings to show his affection. As he had promised, apart from the child, he was willing to give me everything. I'm the kind of person who returns a favor. He gave me dignity and respect, and I would never let him suffer any loss. I said, Simon, I'm not sure if I'll be a good mother. In fact, all I have are lessons and pain, but please believe me, at the very least, I won't let those ugly things happen to Sophia again. For 6 years, Simon has been a good partner in marriage. Trusting him and depending on him was the easiest thing to do. I've thought about it, letting my painful childhood and lonely life rest on his shoulders. Sometimes, doing so would at least make life a little easier for me. But thinking back on everything today, I'm relieved that the shadow cast by Joanna and her mother is still bigger. And Simon, after all, is just Simon. Chapter 5. My mother came to my room late at night to talk to me. We're getting divorced. I looked her in the eyes, my emotions calm and steady. She covered her mouth. I once thought Simon and I could go a bit further. Marriage was never sacred to me. Simon will never know that if the woman by his side were replaced by anyone in the world. As long as he didn't mention divorce, I could have lived peacefully with him. But it had to be Joanna. The daughter of the mistress wanted to use the same tricks. But I refused to fall into the same trap. When my mother heard Joanna's name, she fell silent. After a long pause, she asked, "Are you sure?" I nodded. How could I not be sure? The always well-measured Simon brought Joanna into his social circle. He let others call her little sister-in-law without ever clarifying. 2 weeks ago, he even bought Joanna a Range Rover of oak, while my car was a Range Rover. It's as if he wanted Joanna to be on equal footing with me. Even worse, his stepdaughter, Sophia, threw a tantrum demanding money to buy every one of her third-grade classmates an iPhone. When I tried to reason with her, she glared at me, emboldened. "Luciana, you wicked witch. I don't want you to be my mom anymore. I want Aunt Joanna. If you don't please me, I'll take Aunt Joanna's side." I calmly relayed these words to my mother. She finally broke down, holding me and crying loudly. "What kind of sin did I commit? Monica abused you when you were young, and now her daughter is coming to destroy your family." But she still wasn't willing to fully believe it. She looked at me, muttering, "Simon isn't that kind of person. I told him about your situation. He's always been so considerate and steady. I never expected his sympathy, because I knew that one day, sympathy would become a blade aimed straight at my heart." Chapter 6. I blocked Simon, but on the 3rd day after leaving my mother's house, I received a message from Joanna. "Sister, it's Joanna. I didn't expect my presence to cause such a strong reaction from you. Please believe me. There's nothing improper between Simon and me. Your sudden departure has made things difficult for Simon, and I don't know how to handle this situation. Sister, the grudges of the previous generation shouldn't involve us. Besides, we've already faced retribution. Dad's company went bankrupt. As you know, after all, just a month ago, I asked for your help. You refused. So I turned to Simon. If he has treated me differently, it's only out of respect for you. I know that. So, sister, could you come back? Simon and I are waiting for you here. And also, Sophia, I apologize on her behalf." I quietly stared at those words for a long time. I had to admit, Joanna, my childhood nemesis, always knew exactly where to strike to hurt me the most. Her words truly disgusted me. She was like a maggot, and the moment she surfaced, I realized that some things had already been rotting from the inside for a long time. But I'm not who I used to be. Calmly, I blocked and deleted her, one after the other, without letting a single word hurt me. Joanna, who has been lurking like a sewer rat for so long, now dares to openly provoke me. This could only mean one thing. She thinks she's guaranteed to win. TSK. These tactics, her mother Monica was the original master. Back then, Monica played humble and patient, enduring until Joanna was 3 years old, and only after becoming pregnant with a son did she confront my mother. As expected, later that evening, Joanna changed her number and eagerly found me again. This time, she called directly, no longer bothering with false sincerity or pretense. The first thing I heard was her light chuckle, the same one she used to make as a child when she always got her way. Then, she slowly said, "Sister, you're really lucky. Huh? After leaving us, you still managed to marry so well. You ran away in such a hurry. Were you scared of me? Don't worry, as long as you obediently get a divorce, I won't let you end up like your mother, with nothing." I laughed. "Joanna, did you forget to do your research on me? I graduated from Peking University with a law degree, and I specialize in divorce cases. How about you start by begging me to show you some mercy? After all, it's thanks to the lesson you and your mother taught me as a child that I decided to become a lawyer." On the other end of the line, there was dead silence before she abruptly hung up. I found it quite dull. Leaning against the railing, I looked up at the pitch-black night sky. If Joanna could find me, then Simon, who was likely stirring up more trouble, would have no problem either. I left, but I didn't die. "Simon, I'm waiting for you." Chapter 7. At the charity gala, Simon seemed distracted. Someone came over to greet him. "Mr. Simon, Mrs. Simon." He instinctively frowned, and the man's female companion quickly corrected him. "What are you saying? When have you ever seen Mrs. Simon with long hair?" "Apologies." Standing next to him, Joanna smiled sweetly and linked her arm with his. "It's okay, I just begged my brother-in-law to bring me along so I could see the world." She easily dissolved the awkwardness. Simon's gaze fell on Joanna's waist-length hair, his eyes darkening. He remembered the day Luciana married him. She had inexplicably cut off her long hair, which she had kept for years. It was so short, it couldn't have been any shorter, and she even dyed it a bold burgundy color. It was fiery and sharp, with a new edge. He had tried to probe casually. Women usually cut their hair for a reason. Luciana had simply smiled without responding. That night, still feeling unsettled, he ran his fingers through the prickly ends of her hair. "Luciana, I still prefer you with long hair." But in the 6 years since, Luciana never gave him what he wanted. When they got home, their daughter ran straight to Joanna, glancing behind them. "Humph. I knew Luciana wouldn't have the guts to come back." "Aunt Joanna, come play with me." The tutor followed closely, with a distressed look, and explained to Simon, "Sir, Sophia has a lot of homework today." Of course, Simon knew that wasn't the real issue. It was just that without Luciana, the tutor couldn't keep his daughter under control. He checked his watch. It was already 9:40. Normally, his daughter would have been in bed by now. Noticing his displeasure, his daughter hid behind Joanna, and Joanna opened her arms to protect her, her eyes reddening. "Brother-in-law, if you want to blame someone, blame me." I saw Sophia looking so pitiful. I couldn't help but spoil her a little. Simon looked at the two of them, both wearing such pitiful expressions, and felt a suffocating frustration in his chest. "It's my fault for meddling, brother-in-law. I think I should just leave. If I go, your wife will come back," Joanna added. "No need." Simon irritably stormed upstairs. He tugged at his tie and sat on the edge of the bed, lighting a cigarette. He didn't understand why Luciana couldn't be a little more like Joanna, just lower her guard a bit and give Sophia the motherly love she needed. It wasn't that hard, was it? In just a short month, Joanna had done a great job. He had tried his best. When they first got married, he wanted to use the fact that their daughter was still young to settle the dynamic between Luciana and Sophia. But Luciana insisted that their daughter only call her Aunt Luciana. She said she would maintain the role of an elder, offering Sophia care and love, stating that responsibility was more substantial than motherly love. That day, they had a huge argument behind closed doors, until Luciana, exhausted, finally said to him, "Simon, if I had met a stepmother like me when I was young, I would have been very happy." Her tone was filled with a faint sorrow and helplessness. He was left speechless and held her close, never bringing up the topic again. But for some reason, after their family of 3 had lived peacefully for so many years, he began to feel restless, thinking that things shouldn't be this way. Simon opened his phone and pulled up Luciana's number. As expected, he was still blocked. A wave of frustration welled up inside him. Luciana had always been calm and rational. How had she suddenly become so stubborn and willful? He had even had Joanna apologize to her. Hadn't he? He was lost in thought, only realizing the cigarette ash had burned down to his fingertips when he hurriedly flicked it away. In the end, he decided to call his mother-in-law. But the mother-in-law, who had always been warm and affectionate toward him, simply told him in a detached tone that Luciana had stayed with her for only one night and left the next day. And with that, she hung up the phone on her own. Simon's hand began to tremble slightly. He knew his wife was never the type to air their private affairs publicly, unless it was absolutely necessary. His mind then drifted to the divorce agreement, which didn't seem like it had been hastily written. His heart felt like it was swinging wildly, unable to find solid ground. "Get me Luciana's contact information right away. I'm waiting," he said, his voice trembling slightly as he called his assistant. Chapter 8. It was 3 days later when Simon finally heard Luciana's voice again. She had thrown away her old SIM card and gone to a remote area, and it wasn't until she checked into a hotel that they were able to reach her. Simon, hearing Luciana's calm and emotionless voice, for some reason, the panic Simon had initially felt suddenly turned into an uncontrollable rage, especially when he heard Luciana say, "I've already mailed Sophia's supplementary card to her. She should have received it by now." "What do you mean by that? Is this the way you act as a parental figure? First, you leave home without a word, not considering anyone else's situation, and now all you're doing is passively avoiding the problem." His voice grew more agitated, as if he was deeply disappointed. "Luciana, I think that if you can't maintain a good relationship with your father's family, you won't be able to take a proper attitude toward raising our daughter." After his harsh criticism, there was a heavy silence on the line, and after 3 seconds, the dial tone rang in his ears. Simon stood there for a long time, stunned and a little regretful, before angrily hurling his phone out the window. Chapter 9. A few days later, I got a new phone card and called Simon. I wasn't sure if he would answer from such an unfamiliar number. "Luciana, it's time to stop playing games and come home." Before I could say anything, Simon spoke first, sounding calm and peaceful, as if nothing had happened. "So, can we talk now?" I asked. Simon didn't say anything. I nodded, taking his silence as agreement. "Simon, we've reached an irreconcilable difference. Thank you for the 6 years you and Sophia have spent with me, but let's end it here." Simon still didn't speak, but his breathing grew noticeably heavier. After a few more seconds of silence, I heard his voice again. "When are you coming back?" He was insistent on knowing when I would return. "After we've reached a preliminary divorce agreement. Once I've made a decision, I don't turn back. So there's no need for me to return to discuss further adjustments with him." "Luciana, there's no need for you to take this out on Sophia. If she's done something wrong, you should discipline her properly. I admit my attitude wasn't right, but as a parental figure, you shouldn't stand by and do nothing." I couldn't help but laugh, cutting off his patronizing words. "You should know what the real reason is. Simon, there's no need for these pointless tests." In recent years, Simon had conducted these kinds of unnecessary tests on me many times, and it had already crossed my line of tolerance. He wanted to open up my heart and step inside, but all he did was make me more and more irritated. It was like he insisted on dressing me in a straw raincoat in the dead of winter, not realizing that the wind would leak in from all sides. Chapter 10. After hanging up the phone, Simon opened the liquor cabinet, grabbed a bottle of XO, and began drinking straight from it. As he was getting slightly tipsy, Joanna came in with their daughter. Seeing her staring blankly at something, Simon suddenly remembered that the divorce agreement was still sitting on the nightstand. He snatched it up, intending to tear it apart. But the document was too thick with all its attachments and wouldn't budge in his hands. A flash of frustration crossed his face, and he stood up to feed the papers into the shredder. Watching as each sheet was devoured, his daughter yelled out, "Luciana would never get a divorce. She's just trying to scare us. Daddy, you're so rich, she wouldn't let you go." Simon's eyes instantly turned bloodshot, and Joanna quickly covered the girl's mouth. Stepping forward, she gently tugged at his sleeve, speaking cautiously, "Brother-in-law, sister must be venting her anger on you because of me. Don't take it seriously. After all, it's my fault they were separated." Simon let out a bitter laugh. "What does it have to do with you? You were so young at the time. It's her fault for being so stubborn. She always sees herself as the victim, irrationally rejecting other people's sincerity and even trampling on their goodwill. All she brings to family and relationships is negativity." As he thought of Luciana's lukewarm attitude, Simon kicked the shredder in frustration, feeling himself on the verge of breaking down under the weight of his emotions. Joanna suddenly hugged him tightly. "I know you love her. Everyone says you and your wife are deeply in love. That you've never argued." Simon gave a self-deprecating laugh, pushed her away, and staggered out of the room, only muttering under his breath as he left, "Love? The only reason she agreed to marry me was because she promised she wouldn't have any more children for Sophia's sake." Joanna covered her mouth in shock. Simon didn't offer any further explanation. Heading downstairs alone, a few minutes later, he drove away from the villa. Joanna looked down at the shredder, her eyes filled with a cold glint. If what Simon said was true and his marriage to Luciana was just a transaction, then there was no reason for him to shred the divorce agreement. Luciana was indeed cunning. Chapter 11. I was in a small pottery DIY shop tucked away in an alley, shaping a narrow-necked vase. I hadn't worked with clay in a long time, and my skills were a bit rusty. Mud splattered all over my leather skirt. The tall figure of Simon appeared at that moment, dressed in a dark navy trench coat, walking through the narrow doorway and standing in front of me. He blocked out the rare autumn sunlight completely. Instantly, a chill spread over me. He frowned as he looked at me, seemingly puzzled by the fact that I would even be associated with something like this. It was normal for him not to know. After getting married, I had given up many of my hobbies. After all, with a child to take care of and my job at the company, I had also partnered up with others to open a law firm. As the company's legal advisor, you should know that I can't get divorced right now. I looked at him, understanding exactly what he meant. Simon's company was in the process of acquiring a century-old business that had been poorly managed. His competitors were all formidable, and he couldn't afford any negative news to come out right now. I thought for a moment and extended my hand toward him. "You can give me the signed divorce agreement first." Simon chuckled, a hint of mockery in his expression. "Even if we step into the Civil Affairs Bureau, dear lawyer, I still have 30 days to change my mind. You know, if I really don't agree, I could drag this out for 2 years, what then?" I looked at him quietly. As a lawyer, I knew he wasn't wrong. 7 years ago, if I had known that getting married would be easy but divorce would be so difficult, I would never have married Simon. It was as if I had predicted all the challenges we would face. But I never anticipated that he would bring Joanna into our marriage. And with that, he completely shattered my beliefs, leaving nothing behind. This game was over. I couldn't play it anymore. I smiled, took off my apron, washed my hands, and got into Simon's car. Chapter 12. Joanna came out in her loungewear to greet me. "Sister, you're finally back." Sophia, who had been arguing with her tutor, immediately fell silent and instinctively sat up straight at her desk. The tutor let out a long sigh of relief, casting a grateful glance in my direction. I gave Joanna a brief nod and pushed my luggage toward the guest room on the first floor. "Behind me," Simon said. "Sophia has fallen behind on her studies." "Oh, and the supplementary card is here with me. Just as before, it's yours to manage." He handed me the card right in front of Sophia. Sophia immediately burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. "I promised to give them a phone for my birthday the day after tomorrow. If I don't keep my word, they'll laugh at me," She glanced at Joanna, seeking help. Joanna was just about to speak when Simon sternly reprimanded Sophia. "Stop the nonsense. Your mother will take care of it." I looked at Sophia quietly. She hiccuped and stopped crying under my gaze. "Come here," I said, putting the card away. Sophia grudgingly approached me, still glaring at me with resentment. "Joanna, I'll have the driver take you home," Simon said, not giving Joanna a chance to refuse, effectively sending her away. Joanna looked at us, pursed her lips, but ultimately left. Sophia started whimpering again. After the tutor and nanny left, Simon rubbed his tired forehead and gestured toward Sophia. "Take care of her." In the end, it was just me and Sophia, staring at each other. I was already feeling a headache coming on. Previously, disciplining Sophia was part of my responsibilities. Now, if it hadn't been for the conditions Simon and I agreed upon in the car on the way back, I would never have taken on this mess. Fortunately, the acquisition deal would be finalized this month. In order to get a smooth and quick divorce, there was no other choice. "Have you had enough of this tantrum?" I asked. "You say you're old enough to make your own decisions, but only a child would cry and throw a fit. Mind your own business." "I wasn't crying for you to see," she retorted defiantly. "You won't be getting that phone. But do you still want to fix the issue?" I said calmly. Her brow furrowed tightly. This was clearly a big problem for her. After all, her usual arrogance would crumble if she embarrassed herself in front of her classmates. Still, she wasn't entirely blinded by anger. She knew that now that the card was back in my hands, it was a done deal. After a while, she quietly replied, "Yes." I nodded and pointed to the scattered homework. "Go wash your face. Then finish your assignments. How are you going to fix it?" She stood there, unmoving. "If you don't do your part, I won't bother with it anymore," I replied ambiguously. That's always how I handled her. She huffed angrily and went to the bathroom, then sat down at her desk, furiously scribbling her homework. Every stroke seemed like she wanted to stab through me. I gave a faint smile but quickly suppressed it and headed upstairs. Chapter 13. Half a month later, the acquisition was completed. I printed out the divorce agreement again and waited for Simon to come home in the living room. Simon returned with the scent of alcohol lingering on him. "Join me for a late-night snack?" He asked the housekeeper to prepare some seafood porridge. I picked up the bowl, ready to take a bite, when suddenly a wave of nausea hit me. "What's wrong?" Simon asked. I looked at him, feeling a sense of unease. It wasn't until the family doctor arrived that my absurd suspicion was confirmed. "Congratulations, Mrs. Simon. You're pregnant. You should be about 7 weeks along." Simon nodded, his expression seemingly unsurprised, even showing a hint of joy. I stared at Simon, unable to comprehend it. Not having children was something we had agreed upon, and to prevent me from having second thoughts, he had even gotten a vasectomy before the wedding. But it turned out that he had secretly undergone a reversal surgery behind my back. Last month, Simon returned from a business trip to Munich late at night. He had been away for a week, and when he got into bed, he couldn't resist waking me up. I pushed his wandering hands away. We don't have that." He paused for a moment, then moved closer again. "Back then, it was my idea not to have children. Why are you more guarded about it than I am?" "Stop it," I said. He whispered in my ear with a low chuckle. "No need to be so cautious." I knew he was referring to having had a vasectomy, but I was more afraid of accidents. So all these years, I insisted on using protection. That night, however, Simon was unusually passionate and intense. As a bed partner, he had always been more than satisfactory, exceeding expectations. Half asleep, I let him do as he pleased. In 6 years, this was the one time we got lucky, or rather, unlucky. Chapter 14. Luciana. I didn't expect this either, but maybe it's fate not letting us separate, Simon said as he held my hand. "Let's not talk about divorce anymore, okay? I won't keep the child. It wouldn't be fair to Sophia." I frowned. Sophia had long since decided that she was the only child in this family, and not having any siblings was something I had privately promised her. Though I've been through hardships, I never intended to take away her shelter. She's grown up, And you've raised her well. Simon replied calmly. You don't need to go back to the company for now. I'll have someone from HR quickly find a replacement for your legal position. You just focus on taking care of the baby. He started making arrangements on his own, certain that I would compromise for this child. After thinking for a moment, he picked up his phone. It's too late to call right now, so I'll send a message to my mom to share the good news. Tomorrow, I'll discuss it with her. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to come over and take care of you. He knew this had always been my mother's wish, and he knew that my mother had been feeling guilty all these years, believing that if it hadn't been for her, I would never have entered into this marriage. Chapter 15. Before my mother arrived, Simon started sticking close to me, not leaving my side for a moment. He even moved his work back home. At a certain point, he took the initiative to bring up the issue of Joanna. I saved your father's company, and she's back there working now. You don't need to worry about her anymore. If you still feel unsatisfied, Simon seemed to have everything calculated. Showing the shrewdness of a businessman, Joanna's company has signed an exclusive supply contract. Their products can only be sold to me, Luciana. Their survival is now in your hands. They are walking on thin ice, constantly anxious, and can only try to please you. He gently pulled me into his arms. Whether you choose to forgive them or get revenge, it doesn't matter to me. It was as if he had suddenly awakened to all the things and people that had previously made me unhappy. And now, he was giving me a resolution to each of them. I was somewhat moved, but that was all. What I felt more than anything was a sense of unfamiliarity. The Simon I once knew, the steady, responsible father figure, was gone. As his business empire grew, he became more like an arrogant, insensitive man who thought he could control everything, a man driven by ambition. The next day, Joanna's family came bearing lavish gifts. Just as Simon had said, they tried their hardest to please me. Naturally, I didn't show them any kindness. The housekeeper prepared a banquet, and Joanna's family stood up one after another to toast Simon. However, Simon stayed seated next to me, softly asking how I was feeling. Their hands, holding their glasses midair, froze awkwardly as they stood there, faces full of embarrassment. Brother-in-law, Joanna called out pitifully. Simon didn't even look up, responding coldly, "If you wanted to make a scene, I've already given you enough chances. From now on, you'd better mind yourself." Monica, unable to hold back, blurted out, "Simon, didn't you say you liked our Joanna? If it weren't for this little bee," she almost used the nickname she used to call me when I was young. "If Luciana hadn't schemed to get pregnant, who knows who Mrs. Simon would be now?" I replied calmly, "Getting pregnant to climb the ranks is your usual tactic. What does that have to do with me?" Simon poured me a glass of milk. "Auntie, with a stepmother as malicious as you, I would never dare marry Joanna." Joanna's face flushed red, humiliated and furious. Monica's old face was stomped into the dirt. As for my father, he did what he always did, shift the blame. He pointed at Monica and cursed. "Stop embarrassing me. It's bad enough you're useless, but now you're corrupting my daughter too." Monica, her overweight body trembling, rolled her eyes in fury and collapsed backward. It wasn't until the paramedics arrived that this farce finally ended. That night, Joanna called me. Chapter 16. "Luciana, you don't really think you've beaten me, do you?" Her taunting voice was filled with the madness of someone on the edge of destruction. "Do you really think Simon loves you? Ha. He knows better than anyone how much you hate me, but he still enjoyed flirting with me, giving me hope. He paraded me around just to provoke you." She laughed bitterly, her voice grating and resentful. "I know." "What?" Joanna sounded like she couldn't believe her ears. As Simon's wife, his mindset wasn't hard to figure out. He knew that with my painful childhood, there was no way I'd ever want to lose to Joanna again. To win, I would likely lose my usual calm and rationality and become embroiled in petty jealousy with Joanna. And in doing so, he would get what he wanted, my unconditional love. To ensure it, he even secretly restored his fertility, using the child to cut off my escape route. Of course, he knew all along. Joanna's family has always been a thorn in my side. Yet Simon constantly used Sophia as an excuse to force me to reconcile with my original family. But reconciliation was just a facade. What he really wanted was to see me lose my composure, to see me disheveled and hysterical. He had grown tired of the calm and uneventful 6 years of my distant warmth, which left him feeling defeated. But I had always fulfilled my duties as a wife, taking care of Sophia, and he couldn't find any fault with me. He knows about your provocations, and he knows I've done nothing wrong. It's clearly Sophia's spoiled behavior, but he allowed all of this to happen. So, after I left home, he didn't reach out to me. Instead, he sent Joanna to provoke me further. He wanted to break me, to control me, but what he didn't know was that I would never let my guard down completely to love someone. To me, that was unforgivable. You're happy to carry his child, yet you're acting all high and mighty, pretending not to care. You're destined to lose to us, just like your mother did. Joanna could no longer hide her venom and jealousy. If you're so capable, go ahead and get rid of the child. I don't believe Simon would choose you over me. This child was Simon's plan to ensure a way out for himself. But when he hurt me under the guise of love, we had already run out of escape routes. Besides, what he thought was love wasn't love at all. It was just the lowest form of competitiveness. My gaze flickered. Why should I get rid of the child? Just to fulfill your wish? Joanna's confident voice came through. Luciana, you used to be so afraid of betrayal that you were too weak to even consider dating. A woman like you, so extreme, could never tolerate betrayal. Do you really think you'd give birth to the child of a man who cheated on you? Aren't you afraid that your child will follow in your footsteps and become a paranoid mess like you? I let out a long sigh. Joanna, thank you for enlightening me. Talking to you has been very pleasant. I then pressed the button to end the recording and hung up the phone. Chapter 17. My mother came as promised. She looked at my belly as if it were a treasure and immediately called my stepfather, saying she planned to stay here long term and wouldn't leave until I'd given birth. My mother took over the duties of the housekeeper, buying groceries, cooking, and taking walks with me. She was more nervous than Simon, even forbidding me from doing any work for the law firm. You have partners, don't you? At worst, give them a bigger bonus at the end of the year. You're not short of money these days. Children come first, right, Simon? At the dinner table, my mother rambled on and on. Simon smiled deeply. Of course, I'm glad you're here, Mom. She's always so headstrong and never listens to me. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Well, that's not up to her. Work can't be more important than children. I could only smile helplessly and drink another bowl of soup. Sophia slammed her bowl down and stormed off from the table. Humph. You're all liars. I'm not playing with you anymore. Simon was about to say something to her, but I stood up and said, I'll arrange her evening lessons. Don't worry. I'll calm her down. He took my hand. Thank you, Luciana. I smiled. It's my responsibility. I also hope that the children will get along well in the future. Simon reluctantly let go of my hand. Half a month later, he allowed my mother to take me out for walks. He, too, packed his things and returned to the office. That day, after sending the driver away, I got into my partner's car and headed straight for the hospital. My partner wiped the sweat from his forehead. We made it just in time. If we had been any later, the risks of the surgery would have increased. As they wheeled me into the operating room, my mother hugged me tightly. She wanted to persuade me one last time. Luciana, are you really willing to go through with this? I can see it clearly. Simon loves you. Can't you give him another chance? Everything he's done is just because he wants you to love him a little more. I looked at her weathered face and turned my head to look out the window. So, when my father Domingo knelt in front of you, begging for your forgiveness, were those tears, those promises real? My mother choked up, and tears slipped down her cheeks. Mom, did you and Domingo ever love each other? Did Domingo receive a lot of your love? My mother was speechless. I smiled. Once he got everything from you, he could discard the vulnerable you without a second thought. To him, my mother had no secrets left. There was no need for attachment. Losing vigilance and cutting off your own escape route is the most tragic thing for a woman. So, Simon, who hasn't received my love, isn't pitiful. My mother touched my face gently. I understand now, child. You live with more clarity than I do. There was a mixture of joy and faint sadness in her eyes. I comforted her. Life is full of dissatisfaction. 9 times out of 10, I'm very content with this outcome. If it weren't for this unexpected child, my escape plan would have been flawless. But it doesn't matter. My body will recover soon from the injury. After coming out of the operating room, I was feeling relatively well and asked my partner to take my mom home first. She had already accomplished what she came for. Chapter 18. The anesthesia had barely worn off when Simon burst into my hospital room. He looked at me, hooked up to an 4, and his face darkened instantly. "Where's the baby?" After the surgery, the nurse took it away. His eyes filled with rage, and he rushed toward me, his hand gripping my throat. "You lied to me, Luciana. You never planned on keeping this baby. The baby was your way out, not mine." I had no obligation to fulfill his one-sided desires. His eyes reddened, and fury and pain surged behind them like a storm. Was he upset because he had lost control of the situation? Unfortunately, I don't enjoy having my own plans disrupted either. Now that the baby is gone, can we talk about the divorce? "Don't even think about it," he spat, his voice cold and menacing. "So, you plan to break your promise and drag this out for another 2 years? I threw his own threat back at him, word for word. "Even if you could control everything, I'm only willing to play this game for 2 years. I said, 2 years, I'm in no hurry." He let out a bitter laugh. "So, Luciana, did you become a lawyer just to deal with me?" I just wanted to protect myself. We stood there, locked in a standoff, neither of us willing to back down. Finally, he let go of me and slumped down on the edge of the bed. "The child was innocent. If you really wanted a divorce, why didn't you talk to me?" I was silent. For a brief moment, I had indeed considered it, keeping the baby and divorcing him. But in the end, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want any more ties to Simon, and I wasn't sure if I could bear the responsibility of raising a child. As Joanna said, I'm an extreme, paranoid person. So, in this life, all I need is to love myself well enough. After our unpleasant parting, I sent Simon an audio recording via his phone. He didn't respond, but a few days later, I heard the news that Joanna's small family company had gone bankrupt and was being liquidated. People said that, with nowhere else to turn, Joanna had returned to Simon's side, but that no longer had anything to do with me. On the same day Joanna's family went bankrupt, Simon finally agreed to sign the divorce papers, even making additional concessions in my favor. I, of course, wasn't going to complain about getting more money. Everything went as I had hoped, and I walked away with full pockets and a carefree heart. Chapter 19. After the divorce, I returned to my mother's house. She wanted to take care of me until I was fully recovered, and I had no reason to refuse her. Otherwise, her excessive guilt might lead to a relapse of her old illness. My stepfather was honest and gentle, and with my stepsister married off, I felt at ease resting here. With the generous compensation from the divorce, I opened a small pottery DIY shop near the neighborhood. At first, it was just for my own amusement, but unexpectedly, the business took off. I ended up renting the space next door and creating a private studio for myself. The next time I saw Simon, it was midwinter, and large snowflakes were falling. Simon still wore the same navy blue trench coat, but now he had a beige scarf wrapped around his neck. Over the past few months, I had heard that his business empire had expanded again. He should have been too busy to visit my little shop. He sat down across from me and quietly watched as I molded the still unfinished clay. "What is it?" he asked. I said I hadn't decided yet, that I was waiting to see what it would turn out to be. "I didn't end up with Joanna," he said suddenly. I paused in my work. He let out a self-deprecating laugh. "Yes, you're right. I was still trying to test you. I didn't believe you were truly indifferent." I sighed softly and turned off the machine. Getting up, I washed my hands and made him a cup of coffee. He took a sip and held the cup in his hands, lowering his head. "I guess I won't taste anything this familiar again. Luciana, did I really do something wrong? I just wanted you to feel something different for me. Something more passionate." I didn't know how to respond to him. He let out another self-mocking laugh. "You must be laughing at me in your heart. I used such despicable means, hurting you without any regard. So, is this what it feels like to love someone? I asked, watching him intently. What? He looked up at me in confusion. Well, if this is love, then it's pretty terrifying. I don't want it, I said seriously, realizing what I meant. Simon's expression faltered with a hint of embarrassment. No, this isn't love. After saying that, his eyes reddened slightly. He knew it was his pettiness, his greed. As I walked him to the door, he asked, with a trace of reluctance, if I hadn't tried to change things, would we have made it to the end? Yes, I replied without hesitation. He nodded, opened the car door, and got in. As the car turned and drove away, I knew that this was probably the last time we would ever meet. Chapter 20. Luciana, you were right all along. In the back seat of the car, Simon covered his eyes with his hand, his entire body shrouded in shadows. There were still so many things he hadn't said to Luciana. For example, he still hadn't gotten used to how empty their large bed felt without her beside him, and the absence of her distinct, steady, and gentle footsteps around the house. Even in the midst of Sophia's tantrums, he missed hearing Luciana's calm and firm voice, patiently offering her measured reassurances. These memories kept resurfacing in his mind, but back then, he was always dissatisfied with Luciana's negotiation-style approach to soothing their daughter. It wasn't until he cycled through multiple tutors and high-end nannies, none of whom could manage to handle Sophia, that he realized this was Luciana's unique wisdom. He had always thought that Sophia was deprived and missing out by not having a more traditional form of motherly love. But how could a child who truly felt deprived grow up to be as confident, proud, and assertive as Sophia? He knew now, the problem was him. He had been trying to prove that Luciana was wrong. Time and time again, he had used Sophia as an excuse to demand more from Luciana, when in truth, he had been projecting his own desires, longing for Luciana to show him a different kind of love. He just never knew how to express it. And now that he had lost her, he finally understood that he had already been given the best kind of companionship. When he got home, Sophia was throwing a tantrum, smashing an antique ornament in the living room. The new teacher was trembling with anger. The whole house was filled with Sophia's screams. No, no, Luciana would always respect me. I don't want your fake kindness. It's disgusting and pretentious. I'm already an adult. He stepped into the room, but only children cry and throw tantrums. Without realizing it, he had echoed what Luciana would say. Sophia turned her head, and tears began rolling down her cheeks. Daddy, I miss Aunt Luciana. I want her to come back. He hardened his heart. But she doesn't want us anymore. Sophia trailed after him, stubbornly asking, is it because she's mad at me? Is it because I didn't want a little brother or sister? I was wrong. Daddy, I want a sibling. Please, bring her back. I didn't mean to upset her. I only got close to Aunt Joanna because I wanted her to be nicer to me. Wasn't she nice to you? Simon stopped in his tracks. Sophia was sobbing uncontrollably. I understand now. Only she was truly good to me. She's a stepmother's child. And so am I. That's why she made sure Sophia didn't get caught in the rain that day. Now, both Simon and Sophia understood. Playing the role of a loving mother was easy, but respect and responsibility were the hardest parts. Many times, it's not about overwhelming passion or giving everything with no reservations. A little more space, a little more restraint, and they could have gone much further. Luciana had long understood the wisdom in deep love cannot last. Brilliance burns too brightly, and strength leads to disgrace. Chapter 21. I occasionally hear news about Simon. Some friends even tried to play matchmaker and suggested we remarry. I turned them all down, one by one. They said that Simon has never had another woman by his side since we divorced, and that only when someone mentions me does he show any emotional response. I listened calmly and put it all behind me. As for my current life, I am very satisfied and extremely grateful. I do not regret any of the steps I've taken, because, before I settled down, I had already planned out my escape routes. So after the divorce, Simon may toss and turn, filled with regret and frustration for never truly having me. But I am still who I've always been, not expecting, nor disappointed.